Ancient Egypt. Egyptian culture and history has long held a universal fascination for people, whether through the work of early archaeologists in the 19th century CE, such as Champollion, who deciphered the Rosetta Stone in 1822 CE, or the famous discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter in 1922 CE. The ancient Egyptian belief in life as an eternal journey, created and maintained by divine magic, inspired later cultures and later religious beliefs. Much of the iconography and the beliefs of Egyptian religion found their way into the new religion of Christianity, and many of their symbols are recognizable today with largely the same meaning. It is an important testimony to the power of the Egyptian civilization that so many works of the imagination, from films to books to paintings even to religious belief, have been and continue to be inspired by its elevating and profound vision of the universe and humanity's place in it. Egypt is a country in North Africa, on the Mediterranean Sea, and is home to one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. The name Egypt comes from the Greek Egyptos, which was the Greek pronunciation of the Egyptian name Hwt ka Ptah, mansion of the spirit of Ptah, originally the name of the city of Memphis. Memphis was the first capital of Egypt and a famous religious and trade center. Its high status is attested to by the Greeks alluding to the entire country by that name. To the Egyptians themselves, their country was simply known as Kemet, which means black land, so named for the rich, dark soil along the Nile River where the first settlements began. Later, the country was known as Misr, which means country, a name still in use by Egyptians for their nation in the present day. Egypt thrived for thousands of years, from c. 8000 BCE to c. 30 BCE, as an independent nation whose culture was famous for great cultural advances in every area of human knowledge, from the arts to science to technology and religion. The great monuments which Egypt is still celebrated for reflect the depth and grandeur of Egyptian culture, which influenced so many ancient civilizations, among them Greece and Rome. One of the reasons for the enduring popularity of Egyptian culture is its emphasis on the grandeur of the human experience. Their great monuments, tombs, temples, and artwork all celebrate life and stand as reminders of what once was and what human beings, at their best, are capable of achieving. Although Egypt in popular culture is often associated with death and mortuary rites, something even in these speaks to people across the ages of what it means to be a human being and the power and purpose of remembrance. To the Egyptians, life on earth was only one aspect of an eternal journey. The soul was immortal and was only inhabiting a body on this physical plane for a short time. At death, one would meet with judgment in the Hall of Truth and, if justified, would move on to an eternal paradise known as the Field of Reeds, which was a mirror image of one's life on earth. Once one had reached paradise, one could live peacefully in the company of those one had loved while on earth, including one's pets, in the same neighborhood by the same stream, beneath the very same trees one thought had been lost at death. This eternal life, however, was only available to those who had lived well and in accordance with the will of the gods in the most perfect conducive to such a goal, the land of Egypt. Egypt had a long history which goes back far beyond the written word, the stories of the gods, or the monuments which have made the culture famous. Evidence of overgrazing of cattle on the land which is now the Sahara Desert has been dated to about 8000 BCE. This evidence, along with artifacts discovered, points to a thriving agricultural civilization in the region at that time. As the land was mostly arid even then, hunter-gathering nomads sought the cool of the water source of the Nile River Valley and began to settle there sometime prior to 6000 BCE. Organized farming began in the region c. 6000 BCE, and communities known as the Badarian culture began to flourish alongside the river. Industry developed at about this same time, as evidenced by faience workshops discovered at Abydos dating to c. 5500 BCE. The Badarian were followed by the Amratian, the Gersonian, and the Naqada cultures, also known as Naqada I, Naqada II, and Naqada III, all of which contributed significantly to the development of what became Egyptian civilization. The written history of the land begins at some point between 3400 and 3200 BCE, when hieroglyphic script is developed by the Naqada culture. 3. By 3500 BCE, mummification of the dead was in practice at the city of Hierakonpolis, and large stone tombs built at Abydos. The city of Exoisia is recorded as being already ancient by 3100–2181 BCE, as inscribed on the famous Palermo stone. As in other cultures worldwide, the small agrarian communities became centralized and grew into larger urban centers. Early history of Egypt. The early dynastic period, c. 3150 c. 2613 BCE, saw the unification of the North and South kingdoms of Egypt under the king Menes, also known as Mene-Armanes, of Upper Egypt, who conquered Lower Egypt in c. 3118 BCE or c. 3150 BCE. This version of the early history comes from the Aegyptica, History of Egypt, by the ancient historian Manetho, who lived in the 3rd century BCE under the Ptolemaic dynasty, 323–30 BCE. Although his chronology has been disputed by later historians, it is still regularly consulted on dynastic succession in the early history of Egypt. Manetho's work is the only source which cites Menes and the conquest, and it is now thought that the man referred to by Manetho as Menses was the king Narmer, who peacefully united Upper and Lower Egypt under one rule. Identification of Menes with Narmer is far from universally accepted, however, and Menes has been as credibly linked to the king Hor c. 3100–3050 BCE, who succeeded him. An explanation for Menses' association with his predecessor and successor is that Menses is an honorific title meaning he who endures, and not a personal name, and so could have been used to refer to more than one king. The claim that the land was unified by a military campaign is also disputed, as the famous Narmer palette, depicting a military victory, is considered by some scholars to be royal propaganda. The country may have first been united peacefully, but this seems unlikely. Geographical designation in Egypt follows the direction of the Nile River, and so Upper Egypt is the southern region and Lower Egypt the northern area closer to the Mediterranean Sea. Narmer ruled from the city of Hierakonpolis and then from Memphis and Abydos. Trade increased significantly under the rulers of the early dynastic period, and elaborate mastaba tombs, precursors to the later pyramids, developed in ritual burial practices which included increasingly elaborate mummification techniques. The gods from the pre-dynastic period, c. 6000 c.3150 BCE, a belief in the gods define the Egyptian culture. An early Egyptian creation myth tells of the god Atum, who stood in the midst of swirling chaos before the beginning of time and spoke creation into existence. Atum was accompanied by the eternal force of Heka, magic, personified in the god Heka, and by other spiritual forces which would animate the world. Heka was the primal force which infused the universe and caused all things to operate as they did. It also allowed for the central value of the Egyptian culture, Maat, harmony and balance. All of the gods and all of their responsibilities went back to Maat and Heka. The sun rose and set as it did, the moon traveled its course across the sky, and the seasons came and went in accordance with balance and order, which was possible because of these two agencies. Maat was also personified as a deity, the goddess of the ostrich feather, to whom every king promised his full abilities and devotion. The king was associated with the god Horus in life and Osiris in death, based upon a myth which became the most popular in Egyptian history. Osiris and his sister wife Isis were the original monarchs who governed the world and gave the people the gifts of civilization. Osiris' brother, Set, grew jealous of him and murdered him, but he was brought back to life by Isis, who then bore his son Horus. Osiris was incomplete, however, and so descended to rule the underworld, while Horus, once he had matured, avenged his father and defeated Set. This myth illustrated how order triumphed over chaos and would become a persistent motif in mortuary rituals and religious texts and art. There was no period in which the gods did not play an integral role in the daily lives of the Egyptians, and this is clearly seen from the earliest times in the country's history.